down there. Let's be about it. Michael Feng versus Michael Hamilton. Could you have a more hyped matchup to determine the winner of this pod?
Well, the danger of this matchup here, as we've discussed it many times, Brian, is the fact that Prism is often a very attractive draft hero because the value of the heralds. But walking into Levia is you're bringing a knife into a gunfight sometimes because a lot of those attacks are just all-out poppers. We're opening up here, however, with Joe going ahead and just loading up with the Halo of Illumination, which is the standard opener here for Prism.
Yeah, a very clear reason to go down this route. Michael Feng going to be playing carefully around those poppers and has tools to do so. Going to go ahead and leverage that Iris of Reality whenever he can. More importantly, was very, very actively going after those blinding beams. So going to be able to protect from poppers in many occasions. I think critically, Michael Hamilton is going to want to get some offense going pretty early, start making things uncomfortable for Prism. You don't want to give Prism the time to set up, protect those heralds over the long game, get value from the Iris of Reality. You sort of want to have your foot on the gas pretty early if you're Hamilton. And we've seen Hamilton be very patient in these matchups, just trying to go ahead and set up, get exactly the stocked graveyard that he's looking for. I think this time around you might see a little bit more aggression from Hamilton as he tries to go ahead and find purchase in this matchup quickly. And it could be that Hamilton actually pursues that Michael Feng actually pursues a threat of fatigue against Michael Hamilton. And that's going to mean every point of damage is going to matter. A little disappointing to lose a Dread Screamer in a situation like that, one of the real power cards in Hamilton's deck, but is able to pump that Ravenous Meat Axe up to 5, offer a little bit of damage here.
Silver lining, the first blood goes to Michael Hamilton off of just a little tickle from Belittle. Doesn't even show off any cards in the hand. The Overload in the hand was pitched for that particular play, which would have been the legal target to match with Belittle here. It's going to get matched up here with a Herald and a Stony Wootenhog to just, again, preserve the life total this early.
Yeah, early defense from Michael Feng. Let's see if he wants to do a little setup here. Is it time to go ahead and clear that soul, make a Spectral Shield maybe? Or do we just want to go ahead and get our Heralds on the board? Here is the first Herald attack. First time to put Hamilton to the test. Let's see if there is a popper available. Let's see if there is some counterplay.
There's definitely going to be poppers available in the deck. I mean, it's Levia, but eventually you can't play scared. He's going to go in with a Herald of Rebirth. It's a 7-attack red Herald. It costs you 2. Now, those wonderful breakpoints of 7, which if you don't have a popper can become problematic. But not only that, there's a significant on-hit to this card.
Yeah, it's always nice to go ahead and get that value not only from the soul, but getting another attack from your graveyard loaded up. As we mentioned, fatigue is a omnipresent factor in these Monarch Draft showdowns. You do want to be contemplating that all the time. Things like Herald of Rebirth can be quite impactful for mitigating that threat.
We're going to go ahead and throw a card in front of this, just go bust it up. But there is the first Binding Beam, which is going to kind of play a little bit of a spoiler to Michael Hamilton's safety net.
Yeah, these are the key moments in this match. This is how Michael Feng does it as a Prism. This is how he's going to be able to go ahead and challenge Hamilton here, is able to get that Wartune Herald back on top of the deck, so possibly setting up for yet another attack from one of those threatening Heralds. But right now, 2 cards in Soul, critically. Has that soul loaded up. Here, though, is a very interesting attack. It is a Lunar Tide Plunderer, and this is a very timely Plunderer. Going to go ahead and challenge that soul. And I think this is a big deal on Hamilton's side. Every card taken out of the soul is 1 less Spectral Shield, meaning 1 less Iris of Reality activation you have to worry about that can threaten you without being vulnerable to pop in.
It seems like both players are yoinking those cards out of the draft that are specifically tuned and dialed in to target their shadow or light opponent. In this case, the Plunderer is going to the Plunderer here is going to actually yoink and steal one of those cards out of the soul, which, like you mentioned, is very important for Prism. It's a 6 attack here. It is an easy block. However, you have to respect this. This isn't a card that you can just let pass.
I love watching both these players draft. I get to know how much they prioritize things. Michael Hamilton took this Lunar Tide Plunderer over a pretty impactful Shadow Brute card, and I think it's exactly because you do need to have tools like this available for these matchups, for the Levia versus Prism matchup, where you're able to do not only something like a timely popper, but challenge that soul a little bit. Monarch Draft really requires you to make concessions to what other heroes are good at, particularly the heroes that have inherently good matchups against you. Blinding Beam is such an important part of the equation here. Here we see our first Spectral Shield being made, and it is time for an Iris of Reality attack that is going to be well protected from Phantasm. Get in there for that 4 and ask Michael Hamilton a difficult question. How would you like to defend this? Can you deal with this on a future turn and pressure this Spectral Shield so I don't have it across 2 turn cycles, and maybe let the Spectral Shield onslaught get out of hand?
Now, when Prism is playing this game, knowing that there is so much threat because of the Phantasm, you have to assume, Brian, that these Spectral Shields have to survive in order to get value out of that Iris. How important is it to insulate and protect this Spectral Shield?
I think you want to protect them. It's certainly a priority. You're not reliant on it, though. You can give up Spectral Shield defensively and go ahead and make your next Spectral Shield. It is just important you have a plan. You're rationing these appropriately and making sure in moments where you have to go ahead and not leave yourself vulnerable to a popper, you do have access to these Spectral Shields. And it's a lot about the texture of your hands, how many resources you have available. If you're able to go activate Prism ability into Spectral Shield, it's all a very beautiful dance with no absolute rules behind it. You just have to be thoughtful and careful in your play.
Dread Screamer coming in for a 6 with the go again off the 3 banishes, finds the 6. There's still another 2 hefty targets in the graveyard here. I believe there's one 6+ that's still swimming in there. So Michael Hamilton happy to have still some options there, but 6 go again here is what is on the stack. Michael Feng contemplating the defense here, and again leaning on that Spectral Shield for offenses means that you're going to have to be covering up a lot of these attacks. But he's opting in this case to just let it slide.
Yeah, you just can't afford to a lot of the time, Flake. You have to be content with going ahead and taking the damage and saying, okay, I'll make another Spectral Shield. I don't have to give up my entire hand to defend this. Let's just stick to the plan, slow and steady. No panicky plays, and just defend when it's appropriate to do so. Another 6 attack, back-to-back 6 attacks from Hamilton, 12 damage being thrown the way of Michael Feng.
Very potent offense here again. The Dread Screamer into a follow-up here. Go-agains in this game, very rare, but very potent here as Michael Feng is on the receiving end. Both players have been very adept at sending it, throwing a little combat trick here and there, but he's going to cover this up. 6 block here. Michael Feng lost the Spectral Shield, lost a little lick of life, but Prism's very capable of a 2-card powerhouse hand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it can either be something just like a Herald, or it could be a yellow card and a blue card that get turned into an Iris of Reality attack. Very comfortable playing from low thresholds.
Now, the card that he's opting to keep in Arsenal over here, another Blinding Beam, perhaps?
It's the best card to have in your arsenal. It's certainly the type of turns you want to be setting up for.
3 on the stack here. Overload is dominated attack. Now, it's low to the ground, but if it does hit, it does provide go again. So Michael Hamilton has to be cognizant of the fact that this might follow up with something like, perhaps like an Illuminate or any of those zero-cost attacks that have significant value here. You can't just let this slide.
Yeah, it's at least asking a difficult question, right? If you're Michael Hamilton, you're saying, do you really have a 0 you want to follow this up with? Do you even want to follow this up with a 0? Is that actually a beneficial play for you? So Hamilton taking the time to unpack that, probably in that characteristic Michael Hamilton pose, head in hand, thinking through all the possibilities, all the permutations, until he eventually finds the exact perfect answer.
Questions to ask here, what's the follow-up? Do you really want to hurt me? Do you really want to make me cry?
All those answers are yes.
Yes, they're all yeses. Michael Feng is just out for blood here. Both players are looking to just get that much closer to the top 8 that we're going to have settled tomorrow. We're going to get that cut by the end of the day here. Another 7 rounds in the books. This is the last round of the draft today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to follow this up by
from here out.
It's going to be great, but we got to get through this. We're going to go ahead and throw a card in front of here. Nothing gets through. No go again. We're going to be content here, dropping a card in Arsenal. Michael Feng drawing up here. At this juncture, you got to be pretty happy with Michael Feng's approach here against a hero like Leviah that can just outright stop these attacks.
Yeah, and just going to go ahead and fire off a 6 to start the turn.
And then these 6s are going to be locked and loaded in Leviah's deck here as Leviah is potent, has a lot of high ceiling attacks here, much like Prism, but these are going to also contribute to that graveyard, which is a very important aspect of the Leviah deck, looking to banish out of the graveyard. However, late into the game, perhaps Michael Feng is just opting to think about the late game potential of Blood Debt hanging over the head, like a sword of Damocles, a constant threat looming that just gets heavier and heavier. Is there any consideration here where Michael Feng might be thinking, you know what? we might just draw this out. I'll pick and choose my spots here, but if you're opting to just load up on Blood Debt, perhaps that's the game plan.
I will tell you, against the average player, you can often get away with that. Against Michael Hamilton, I don't think it's going to work. I think he's going to pitch stack appropriately. I think he's going to leave himself with the perfect thread of sixes to go ahead and shut off that Blood Debt. We've seen it many, many times from Hamilton. I know he's an excellent pitch stacker, has near encyclopedic knowledge of the bottom of deck, and he will know what he's facing on a given turn cycle and will adjust appropriately.
Blinding beam time is my thought process
Feels
here.
like it.
It's got to be. You're sending a fat Herald here with no knowledge of what's in the hand, and you can probably bet dollars to donuts here that Michael Hamilton has a response here, but perhaps Michael Hamilton is actually anticipating the blinding beam.
Could be. It could be you want to go ahead and commit a couple cards here, and I think that's what we're seeing Michael Hamilton debate, saying, well, if this is a blinding beam turn, do I want to play around it? And it's a complicated question. I think the real problem is that I don't. You have to deal with it at some point, right? It just is a card that is always going to be there. It's going to have influence over this game. You can't really play around it in this scenario. So you kind of just let it happen and say, okay, how bad is it really if this Wartune Herald collects, if you go ahead and load up the Soul? And there is already a card in Soul, so it's not like this is the only thing granting access to that Iris. So let's see how Hamilton wants to play it out. Of course, with those 2 resources floating, it is going to be a popper here. Soul Harvest coming down, attempting the pop.
Oh, and he's just
going to.
Right, the bluff was called. Right city to do it in as well. Ultimately, here there was the 2 float, but he doesn't go ahead and actually utilize the 2 float here to develop a Spectral Shield.
Yeah, he can't. He can't with only 1 card in Soul. It's too critical that he has access to Iris when he needs it. He has to be patient with that activation. It's not just about resource maximization. You know, kind of step 1 to becoming a great Flesh and Blood player is learning resource maximization, trying to get the most out of every single pitch. Step 2, and then probably steps 3, 4, 5, is learning when to break the rules and understanding you just can't afford to take that maximization. In this case, you need to maintain access to Soul.
Deadwood Rumbler for 7, pitching a Deadwood Rumbler to help it out here. It's got no block value, but who cares when you're just throwing it hot and heavy here? This is a 7 attack. Michael Feng looking to respect this here. A hand has, he's holding on to Brandish, I believe, as well as some other 2 blocks. So not an easy hand to digest here. Ultimately, 7 on the stack. Michael Feng just evaluating the hand here. Looks like he's got a couple cards locked and loaded to go ahead and meet this on the center of the battlefield. The combat chain, it's not long, but it's tall, baby. A Herald. I believe there is a brandished. So he has his capability here to absorb some of the damage. Yeah. Banishing a card here, satisfying the Blood Debt.
Yeah, able to get that banish from the Deadwood Rumbler.
And that's got to be important as well. And ultimately, you know, 1 Blood Debt here, 1 Blood Debt there. It's not the end of the world when you're just kind of ticking down, but late game you kind of get to a point, Brian, where you're like, I wish I had that extra life point. I wish that this break point wasn't going to end the game.
Flesh and Blood is a game played on the thinnest of margins. Every decision matters, every life point matters, and if you can go ahead and find protection on a turn, you certainly want to do so.
Michael Hamilton just going to go ahead and double check in there. What has been played? What can I anticipate? Again, this is limited. It's very difficult to make those types of anticipations, but what is he just calculating? Is he just counting cards to see what's left, or is there anything that he's actually fishing out of there?
I think there's multiple things he could be looking for. First step 1 is just knowing what was present in the draft, trying to track the number of blinding beams. He wants to see how many has been played thus far, how many power cards has been played thus far. You don't know exactly how many threatening reds your opponent may have in deck, but you can estimate, you can guess. And also, now you're starting to see a very critical part of this matchup be assessed by both of these players. Cards left in deck. That is absolutely something that could come into play here. Is Hamilton going to be able to get over the threshold to kill Prism before he dies to his own Blood Debt? There is an eventuality in this matchup. Blood Debt will consume you as Levia.
Inevitability as much of an enemy as the game clock, as your opponent. You have to keep that on the docket to make sure that you are aware that even though it's just 1 late game, the inevitability of that ticking down every turn will get you. And I believe he counted about 15 or 16 cards here for Michael Hamilton. Not sure how much Michael Feng has left locked and loaded. He's, again, double-checking his graveyard as well. And you said that I believe there was 3 blinding beams that were drafted here, and
Correct.
You got to assume that they are all in that deck.
Yep. Yeah, I would absolutely assume so.
All right, tossing a Herald of Ravages and the Brandish in front of this, blocking 5 of the 7. 2 leaks through, no problem, though. Those Heralds, again, I feel like they're, in this particular matchup, unless you've got a Blinding Beams to actually protect those Heralds, a lot of the times they're going to think about it from a perspective of, hey, these are just block value. As now, at the lower life total, we have Adrenaline Rush Yellow, so it's a base 3, which does match up nicely with Belittle, should you find it, but it's going to get a +3 little upgrade here based off of the fact that you're playing at a life deficit.
Yeah, I want to point out something very important on that last turn cycle. Hamilton played that card inefficient, and what I mean by that is he did not use his whole hand, had a card in hand, drew only 3 cards from the top of deck on that turn. That tells me a lot. It tells me Hamilton is being cautious with the idea of getting fatigued here. We haven't seen Ravenous Medax be a huge part of this game. That tells me that Hamilton is cautious about getting fatigued here. A whole bunch of play patterns just telling Michael Hamilton, careful, take your time, don't get caught unawares of this additional angle of pressure that Michael Feng is able to put your way. But critically important is that Michael Feng continues to pressure that life total. You have to go ahead and demand respect, demand cards from hand. That is another way of virtually fatiguing your opponent. And, you know, there is a mode of fatigue that is simply just defend, defend, defend. That's not really how fatigue works the vast majority of times. It is often far more about going ahead and presenting threats that require your opponent to commit multiple cards and leave them without what they need to go ahead and present those same threats back to you.
6 damage presented here back to Michael Feng. A hand loaded with lots of generics. Again, I believe there's a, is that an Enigma Chimera he's holding onto as a 3-block Frontline Scout, if I'm not mistaken.
It looks like it was a miss on that Shadow of Blasphemeth, so that's not going to be charged up.
It's still 6 damage, which represents more than half your life total at this point.
Yeah, fine card. Fine card to play in that spot.
And ultimately, 6 damage is 6 damage. And when you're playing a limited format with young heroes, throwing big numbers sometimes is just as good as any type of razzle-dazzle combo that you can put together.
Yeah, 6 is big. 6 takes over a quarter of your life total.
All right, we're going to throw some cards in front of this here. I believe that is going. That is one of the only, I believe, the only D-React that is in this set.
Yeah, Rise Above. Down.
Yeah, it's going to block 4. You're going to put a card on top to help pay for this, so you're not necessarily losing out on card value.
Very card efficient. Once again, also card efficient is that Ironhide set ready to go at some point that is going to be able to turn a yellow into 4 blocks. So there's a lot of efficiency built into Feng's deck on the defensive side.
5 on the return fire here. Michael Feng did take some damage. Sending it back. Michael Hamilton, 9-0, has been flawless in the tournament so far, looking to continue that streak. I don't know when the last time Michael Hamilton has lost a match in the U.S. Nationals.
1984.
Perfect. Considering he was born in the 90s, that is quite a feat. That is definitely a statistic here. Smash with Big Tree.
Yeah, that's a nice 2-card hand here. Firing off for 7 is Hamilton. Going to get 2 cards on defense from Feng. A little bit more damage leaking Feng's way, and a little bit more blood debt damage, too, for Michael Hamilton. He is content taking that 1 damage, but being very careful not to add to that toll.
Oh, wow. Another Herald of Rebirth red. Breakpoints aplenty here. 1 card left in hand. Could that be another Blinding Beam? It's completely possible here. The fact that Michael Hamilton has seen 1, you kind of anticipate more, and you know that can absolutely ruin your day because it's not just about the damage. The recursive effects are going to be backbreaking.
Yeah, and this is actually the card that is going to let me say that I think Michael Feng is in the lead in this game. I think he is in a privileged position. If this card hits, it does represent a problem for Michael Hamilton. The deck is just larger for Michael Feng. And like I mentioned, there are still defensive options available. A virtual 4-block out there in the arena, ready to go off those Ironhides. Hamilton having to play carefully from that threat of blood debt. And I think it's slowing down his offense just a bit. The problem is, though, what's going to really slow down his offense is cards in deck. And this Blinding Beam finding the perfect target. Going to go ahead, critically put a 2nd card in Soul, get that trigger, put a fine card with Phantasm back into the mix.
Yeah, that's a nasty little surprise here for Michael Hamilton as Michael Feng pulls a rabbit out of his hat, or the arsenal, depends on what you want to call it, but ultimately it's going to nerf the attack value of the defending card, meaning that no more Phantasm. So the double duty here of Herald of Rebirth going to Soul. That's a great thing. The recursive effect, and at this point of the game, we saw Michael Hamilton counting the deck. Okay, I've got like 5-6 cards left. We are in the end game state here. Any plus card value that I give Michael Feng, who cares about damage? I just don't want to get run out of cards.
This is the turn, I believe. I believe what Hamilton is able to produce on this turn is going to dictate the course of this game. It is time for Dread Screamer. That means we are no longer in a state where we can afford to ignore Blood Debt. There's likely to be several Blood Debt cards joining the one already in the banish zone at this point, potentially shut off on this turn already by this Dread Screamer effect. We'll have to see what the banishes are, but I think that this is the moment where Michael Hamilton has to say, I have to present some damage here or I'm just in trouble. I'm not going to have the cards required to kill you. It is a clean 6 here, so it looks like I think 2 more cards with Blood Debt are going to join that one already in the banish zone, but Levia is turned on for this turn cycle.
I think Michael Hamilton here is realizing that it's not about Blood Debt, it's not about deck size, it's about trying to kill my opponent at this juncture.
Has to happen.
And this is a great start. Dread Screamer finds the banish of the 6 to go 5, go again. So Michael Hamilton looking to go wide and as tall as possible here, as this is the first order of business. Michael Feng here is going to commit some cards to block here. Looks like we're already presenting the Ironhide Gauntlet. You've got the Ironhide Plate as well, the chest piece that can help you out here. Both players haven't touched their equipment yet, other than the early game Halo. So the protective aspects are still in play. We're going to pitch the Belittle here. Again, preserving cards in the deck. Michael Feng understands that whether it's the Blood Debt or just getting decked out, he needs to stay alive to see that endgame.
Yeah, and it looks like choosing to take 3 damage here, saving the next defensive salvo for whatever Hamilton has on deck here. What is the follow-up? How big can we go?
Oh, it's
going to go ahead and close the chain.
A big boy, too.
Yeah, it's Boneyard Marauder coming through for another 6, so there's going to be some more banishing action going on here.
Michael Feng holding on for dear life. Michael Hamilton realizing Blood Debt is around the corner. We're running out of cards. We're running out of runway. We got to land this thing, and the only way to do so is to clear that runway, and Michael Feng in the middle of it, just standing pat, trying to maintain the life total to achieve that inevitability. This Boneyard Marauder at 6, representing lethal. It's going to be a 2-card block, it looks like.
Yeah. Feng just completely committed to defense at this point, and I think he is, I won't say all in. There's always some weird shifts that can happen in terms of demanding cards from your opponent, but I think he's trying to run Michael Hamilton out of threats here.
The Blood Debt stacked up to 6. Might as well be 6 million at this juncture. We're going to throw an Out Muscle, I believe, as well as another War-Tune Herald to toss in front of the 6 here, drop down to 1. Something leaks, but with the 2 float, great option here. We're going to have a Spectral Shield generated. Now, this can count as both offense and defense.
Yeah, nice efficiency generated by Michael Feng, able to use that first resource to go ahead and get an Ironhide block and then produce the Spectral Shield. Now comes in for 4. Just that little bit of threat here. This is about the last turn that Hamilton can go ahead and ignore this threat. Can he put together lethal with the cards he has in hand? How has his pitch deck been? Michael Hamilton, a master of setting up for the late game. This game being played on a razor's edge right now.
There's definitely consideration here where Michael Hamilton just takes it. However, the risk there is you die to your Blood Debt if you whiff. You don't get an extra turn here. He can toss a card in front of it. He's doing all the calculations. If anybody knows the sheer reach of his hand, it's going to be Michael Hamilton, who I've played against them in Limited in this format. He knows what he's doing when it comes to it. Here's the Hooves of the Shadow Beast, a first utilization of those equipment pieces. Michael Hamilton looking to get some action points here.
Yeah,
tossing this in front, rather. Sorry.
On the next go around, he's going to use it for action points. That's why we see it now committed with its battle when he's thinking about his next turn and how wide he can get, how many ways he can threaten Michael Feng. And I've seen Hamilton play this spot multiple times with Levia. He's come out ahead every single time. He's played to this position over and over and over throughout these limited rounds. Every single time, he has exactly enough to win the game. We've seen it repeated throughout this draft, throughout yesterday's draft. Is it going to be history repeating itself? Is he going to be able to find that last offensive flurry to go ahead and take down Michael Feng?
Looks like he's going to sign for it here, going down to 5. Blood Debt is lethal, but he, like you mentioned, the utilization of the boots here indicative of the fact that he is going to go and start popping off. And how high, how wide can Michael Hamilton go?
Yeah, and there's also a looming threat of potentially producing some dominate from Hamilton. And what we see here is the first step to going about that. There is going to be a key banish now, and I think the odds are set up in Hamilton's favor.
Well, we're looking to supercharge the next attack here, but you got to start banishing if possible. You got to make sure that these attacks do not whiff. You want to get the sheer maximum value possible. Michael Feng, you're going to be peeling the cards. Perhaps the architect of his own demise is Michael Hamilton is trying to cross that finish line before he stumbles just at the end, loading up on Blood Debt. Again, we're past the point of counting Blood Debt. It doesn't necessarily matter, but we're going to pop the Shadow, the Who's of the Shadow Beast, get an additional action point indicated on the hero there. What is the follow-up?
It looks like it's a Rumbler coming in. It is a blue one, but it is going to be pumped by that Unworldly Bellow. Draws and discards. Not going to have the banish. Already clean from that Blood Debt, though, so just going to present 9 here. Action point remaining, 2 resources, 1 in arsenal. Is the follow-up Ravenous Meat Axe? Is there something even more devious in Hamilton's arsenal ready to go? How's the block on Feng's side? Does he have enough to survive this attack? This feels like the whole ball game, Flake. It's all about what comes out of either that arsenal or that Meat Axe. Hamilton knows that top card of deck. I guarantee it. He knows exactly whether Meat Axe will hit or not.
Here it comes. We're going to go ahead, and with the Spectral Shield pitching in, it's a full coverage. The Meat Axe is going to be the follow-up here. It's going to be flipping.
That's a miss, I believe. It is not going to be a pumped Meat Axe.
It is not what you want to see. I don't think there's a 3 on that
die. Yeah, not going to find a 3, and that is going to be covered up. Feng going to take 1 here, go to 2, and that is it for Hamilton's turn. And now let's check out that pitch deck. What are we working with on the next turn critically? I believe those are both blues. And an additional card in hand with a card in arsenal here from Hamilton. Feng just drawing up, ready to play some defense. Does Hamilton have lethal pieced together from these 4 measly cards, which were the dregs used to power his turns? Is there something here that can actually present this last 2 damage? Is that, of course, that plate on Feng's side ready to jump into defensive action should one of his cards not be up to the defensive task?
And again, the efficiency of using a blue to pay for 1 to activate the plate, to give it the 2 block, and then on the far side of that, just generating the Spectral Shield should you use it, should you need it. There's a significant volley that Michael Feng withstood here. Michael Hamilton has, like you mentioned, this might be it. This is the Hail Mary pass that he's hoping gets scooped up in the end zone here. He's got to convert. He's done a valiant job here, despite the sheer deficit of, just card value. And you got to think about this, Brian. Those 2 Herald of Rebirths that he managed
Huge. There's 3 cards left in the deck right now. I mean, they mattered so much. Looks like Overload is the pitch here. Unworldly Bellow comes out. And then that is a consuming aftermath that's going to be buffed by that Bellow, I believe. And Feng just goes ahead and shows defensive cards. He says, I don't really care what happens on this banish. I have this covered up. I am safe in this instance.
Well, that's it. We're going to throw the cards over anyways. We're going to follow the rules of Flesh and Blood here as the fist bump occurs. It looks like Michael Feng weathered the storm, a matchup that is typically lopsided towards